Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is an equipment video. I'm going to basically do a long-term review of my Nikon Z8 in terms of wildlife photography. So is it a good camera body for wildlife photography? Now I've had this camera for about a year, almost a year now, so I'm going to give you an in-depth review of all the good things and a couple of sort of minor sort of gripes as well. So I'm not paid by Nikon or anybody else. I buy all my own kit and I bought the Z8 myself, so it's going to be a real honest review of what I think about the Z8, especially in terms of wildlife photography. I do all sorts of photography, landscapes, architecture, night photography, but when it comes to this channel, most people are interested in wildlife photography, so that's what we're going to concentrate on. So is it a good wildlife photography camera body? And as I say, I don't get paid for this, so it's an honest review. Now it's going to be the sort of review in terms of how does it perform out in the field. This is not going to be put on a lab, and I'm not going to do bench tests or anything like that, but it's an honest review of how this has performed over almost a year of wildlife photography. So yeah, we'll crack on, and we're going to talk about build quality, obviously autofocus performance, image quality, frame rate, EVF performance, the whole works. And as I say, I'm going to very much it's very much going to be in tune when it comes to with regard to wildlife photography and action photography. Let's start with talking about the build quality. This is a really solidly built camera. It's going to stand up to a lot of use out in the field. It's got a really nice solid grip. All the buttons are set out generally like most Nikon cameras. You know, if you're used to using Nikon mirrorless cameras before, you're going to find this is a fairly standard setup. So I like the way it's set up. It's weather sealed and it's very solidly built. It's going to take a lot of punishment. So if you're out in hazardous environments, you know, on the beach, out in sort of all weathers, the Nikon Z8 I think is going to be a pretty solid performer. Now, when it comes to how all the buttons are set out, as I say, it's fairly standard to most Nikon mirrorless cameras, and I like the setup. I find it really easy to use. Now, I've not got the biggest hands in the world, but all the buttons pretty much come to the fingertips fairly easily. You've got exposure compensation on the top, ISO setting button on the top, and then we've got a function FM1 and FM2 on the front here. Now on the FM1 button, I normally have that set up so I can cycle through all the autofocus area modes, and that really comes quite easily to the finger. Now I do find that the FM2 button is a little bit awkward. It's a little bit further down the body, and because I haven't got particularly big hands, that can be a bit awkward for me to get to, but it's not the end of the world. You've got a whole heap of buttons on the back, focus sort of, you know, position, a little sort of button here so you can move your focus points around, and the rocker switch on the back, and your normal, you know, play button, info button, and all that sort of stuff. So it's all fairly normal, but the build quality is great. The way the buttons are set out are great. It's weather sealed. It's going to take a lot of battering, I think, this camera body. So no complaints when it comes to build quality or how the camera feels in the hand. Okay, so probably the most important thing when it comes to this long-term review is autofocus performance. I'm guessing that's the thing you're all going to be most interested in, and it was certainly one of my most important things I wanted to find out about. Now, the Z8 has got animal eye detect, and after a firmware update, bird eye detect. And was it worth upgrading? Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I have to say, it's one of those areas where I just am stunned at the performance, the autofocus performance. It works great with the 180 to 600, the Z lens, but it also works really well on F-mount lenses with the F to Z adapter. I just think it's stunning. So with the animal eye detect, it will literally pick out a bird's eye. Now, it's not 100% accurate or reliable, but no camera system is. But am I getting more in-focus pictures by using animal eye detect on the Z8? And I absolutely am. Now, I do use a number of different focusing areas. I use the whole frame area if the bird is in the sky and there's no distractions, but I also will use some of the zones. So you can pick a small zone, a small box, a big box, or a horizontal box or a vertical box. So if you pick one of those boxes, you're actually giving the autofocus a helping hand, because it will only look for that bird's eye or that animal's eye in that area that you've picked. And I find that that's a really good option, and I have that on a custom button so that I can cycle through those different areas when I need to. So autofocus performance it's fast, it's snappy, it locks on. I'm finding it's not hunting around, and yeah, I mean, what else can I say? The bird eye detect works brilliantly, the animal eye detect works brilliantly. If you take it off eye detect and just use either single AF or a group of autofocus points, they're really fast, accurate and snappy as well. So literally no complaints when it comes to the autofocus. I'm amazed at how good it is. So yeah, a big thumbs up in that department. Again, image quality is really, really important, isn't it? And another thing that, you know, we're all going to be interested in. This has got a 45 million pixel sensor in it, and the fine detail is superb. When it comes to wildlife, what that 45 million pixel sensor does is it gives you the ability to crop. I can crop half the frame out and I've still got 20 plus million pixels. So that is a really big bonus. The colours are great as well. Nikon colours are always pretty good, I think. And I normally shoot RAW files, so I can adjust the colour balance, obviously post-production, without any problems at all. But the JPEG files straight out of the camera also look nice. But, you know, if you're going to use a 45 million pixel camera, I think, you know, my attitude is shoot RAW files, get the best quality you can out of the sensor. The only thing I would say, and it's not a moan because I sort of expected that, but you do get more noise at high ISOs with the 45 million pixel sensor than I did with my 24 million pixel sensor on the Z6 II. But I don't find that a big problem because we can use noise reducing software now, and I'll take the extra megapixels for the ability to crop and that extra fine detail pretty much every time, I think. So yeah, image quality is superb. I don't think anyone's going to have any complaints about it, to be honest. The Nikon Z8 will shoot 20 frames a second in RAW, and it will go way beyond that in JPEG, so 30, 60 frames a second, I believe. But as I don't shoot JPEG very often, I tend to not worry about that. So for me, the 20 frames a second shooting RAW files, and it'll go for ages. I mean, it just doesn't buffer at all. It doesn't seem to anyway. So the 20 frames a second is more than fast enough for me. And in fact, often I'll knock it down to 10 frames a second because, you know, it depends on the subject. Sometimes you do need 20 frames a second because it might be a woodland bird taking off, for example, and you want to get that, you know, that little split second bit of action. But if you're doing sort of like a static bird or a bird, a wader that's just pottering around on the shore, then maybe you don't need 20 frames a second. Maybe you shoot with 10 frames a second, because it just means you've got so many pictures that are exactly the same as each other to wade through on the computer when you get back home. So, you know, for me, easily big enough frame rate, I'm more than happy with 20 frames a second, and I've not found that wanting at all, actually. The electronic viewfinder is superb, it's crisp, it's clear, there's no blackout, so you can literally shoot a number of frames a second and follow a bird in flight with no problem. So it's a lovely crisp viewfinder, and the LCD on the back of the camera as well is crisp. It's great for reviewing the pictures. It's good to zoom in and check your sharpness. So both the EVF and the LCD on the back are great. Got no complaints whatsoever, and yeah, it's just generally a really well-built, solid camera that does the job. You know, to be honest, you know, I absolutely love it. I've had it, as I say, nearly a year, and I've taken a lot of pictures with this camera, and I'm really, really, really pleased with it. Video features on the Z8 are pretty impressive, to be honest. It's got 4K 120 frames a second, so 4K slow motion. And the other thing I think I found really useful was the fact that it doesn't seem to overheat too much. I was in Slovenia photographing brown bears a few weeks ago, and it was 30 degrees plus in some of the heights, and I was shooting 4K 120. so slow motion video, and the camera was getting hot, but it never once cut out. And I had a friend with me who was shooting with a different camera make, and they had real problems with overheating. So I think when it comes to video, you've got a really good set of features. So 4K 120. Obviously I shoot at 25 frames per second occasionally as well. That's in 4K. All the focusing modes are really good. It's snappy, it focuses really quickly when I want it to, and the image quality is superb. So I don't think there's anything to sort of anything that I need video recording wise that the Z8 hasn't got actually. So again, more than happy with that. With my Z6 II, I couldn't do 4K 120. I had to do it in HD 120. So if I was shooting slow motion, which I do like to do for wildlife, it was HD rather than 4K. But the Z8 has got 4K slow motion, 120 frames a second. So that's a really big improvement, and I'm really pleased with that. The Nikon Z8 is feature packed. It's got so much going on under the bonnet, and pretty much everything I need is here. Great image quality, brilliant autofocus, good frame rate, it's well put together, all of that stuff. There are a couple of things that I think could do with improvement actually, and one of them is the fact that you can only shoot using pre-capture in JPEG rather than RAW files. Now pre-capture is an unbelievably useful option on a lot of modern cameras, and what it basically means is when you activate or half press down the shutter button, the camera's taking pictures before you actually press the shutter button fully down to take a shot. So if you're photographing, say, woodland birds, and you want to get a woodland bird take off, often when we hit the shutter button, we're just not quick enough, and the bird's taken off and it's already out of the frame before you take your first picture. Now with pre-capture, what it basically means is you can record 1 second's worth of picture while you're activating the autofocus, but before you press the shutter button, and that's at 30 frames a second. So that bird takes off, you press the shutter button, you're not quick enough, but you've already got 30 pictures beforehand, so you've got that bird taking off. So it's a great option for that fast moving, unpredictable action. But with the Nikon Z8, it will only record in JPEG files. So I shoot RAW pretty much all the time, and I think most serious photographers do shoot in RAW files. So not to be able to shoot in RAW is a really big shame, and I hope there's something that either gets sorted out in maybe a firmware upgrade, but I suspect it won't happen on the Z8. I think it will be another camera, but that would be one of the downsides with the Z8. You can't shoot that pre-capture, or some cameras call it pro capture, but you can't use that in RAW files. It's got to be JPEG files. And then the other thing that I think winds me up completely, to be honest, is the focus stacking option. Now, the focus stacking is great. You can set up the amount of pictures you want, the distance between the focus stacking, all the things you would normally set up for any manufacturer of a camera. Lots of cameras have got a focus stacking option, and it's really good, especially for macro. Now, with some cameras, you set up the focus stacking, you're ready, you press the shutter button, and it will just do the focus stack. It will take a number of pictures, bang, 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 from foreground to background, and job's done. With the Nikon, you can't do that, and I don't know why. What you have to do is set the picture up, and then you have to, let's say you're doing a dragonfly. You've sorted your composition out, you've already set up your focus stack, you've focused on the dragonfly, you've set up your composition, but with the Nikon, you don't press the shutter button to activate the focus stack. You have to go back into the menu and press start. And for me, that just doesn't make any sense, because with a macro subject, even slight movements or slight movement of the subject or your camera position, it changes the composition completely. So it's the focus stacking, unless I'm missing something, is completely unusable for insects macro, macro photography of insects. It's all right if you can lock the camera on a tripod, like you're doing a flower or a landscape that's not going to move, because you can set up your composition and then set up your focus stack, go back into the menu and press start, and it's all okay. But if there's any chance that that subject's going to move, by the time you've gone back into the menu to press start, the subject might have moved slightly and the composition is going to be gone. So it's a real shame. Focus stacking is great and it works in general on the Nikon Z8, and it's the same for all Nikon cameras actually, but for close-up or macro photographs of something that might move, I think it's pretty much unusable. So that's something I would love to see get changed. So what do I think about the Nikon Z8 as a wildlife photography camera? Well, it won't come as any surprise that I think it's a brilliant camera. It's got great build quality, fantastic autofocus, the frame rate's great, the image quality is superb, and apart from a couple of minor gripes about not being able to shoot raw files with the pre-capture and, you know, a slightly awkward focus stacking option, it's a brilliant camera. In fact, it's probably the best camera I've ever owned and certainly the best camera for action photography. So if you're a Nikon user and you're looking for a good wildlife photography camera body, I don't think you can go far wrong. And one of the things I like also that I didn't mention about the Z8 is quite a small, compact and reasonably light body. I actually chose this over the Z9 because it's smaller and lighter. It's got just as good at autofocus. Most of the options, the functions and the image quality is just as good, but it's in a small, reasonably lightweight, reasonably compact body. So I think it's great. And then just to mention before I go, again, I don't get paid by Nikon or anybody else. I bought this camera body, I've had it for about a year, and it's my honest sort of thoughts on the Z8. And, you know, I think it's just brilliant. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you have enjoyed it, if you give it a thumbs up, a like, that would be brilliant. That always helps my channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, if you can consider subscribing, that would be also great. The more the merrier. And then last but not least, if you've got any thoughts on the Z8 as a wildlife photography camera body, just drop them in the comments section below. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll speak to you on my next video. So bye for now.